Right off the top, to a reported plot by Iranian leaders to assassinate the President of the United States. The Wall Street Journal reports Israeli officials tipping off the president about that threat level. So let's talk about it. Live to CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata. Charlie, we know you're checking your phone for your sources and the freshest reporting on this and other matters in Iran. To that alleged plot, how credible is this?
Yeah, well, Reed, we have been looking into the credibility of this plot to see if there are any details. And honestly, it's been a bit skinny on the ground because we made the phone calls, but that doesn't mean they're not taking it seriously. We understand that this was tipped off by Israeli intelligence, and there wasn't details about exactly who, what, where, when this plot was going to be tried to have been launched, but it was something to take seriously, certainly something the Secret Service took seriously. But we also have to reiterate the fact that the Iranians have had it out for President Trump since back in 2020 with the killing of Qasem Soleimani, who was in charge of Al-Quds. And right after that was when the first death threats came out, not just from average Iranians, but from the Iranian government. So this has kind of been long-standing for 5 or 6 years that they've had these death threats out for President Trump. And as you just saw in those images, even during the funeral of Ayatollah Khamenei, they were carrying banners that say, "Hey, Trump, we will kill you." So it's all right there, but all of these threats need to be taken seriously. And of course, remember just a couple days ago, he had flown into Turkey on the new Qatar Air Force One, and then he flew out on the old American Air Force One. We understand that was because of security issues. Air Force One, the old Air Force One, has defenses that the new one hasn't got yet. It's got communication that the new one hasn't got yet. So just on an abundance of caution, that is what they flew back. And I have to also mention that Turkey is within easy reach of Iranian missiles. They actually fired a couple toward Turkey that were intercepted by NATO defenses back in March.
Also, I've got to ask you about this. We've seen the largest escalation of the war since the collapse of the ceasefire yesterday. A lot of troops in harm's way at this hour. So where do things stand in the conflict zone, Charlie?
Yeah, so I spoke to officials from CENTCOM this morning, Reed, and I was told, yes, they have pressed pause. I mean, it's self-evident that that's happened because after we saw 2 or 3 days of major fighting between the United States and Iran, there hasn't been anything really to report in the past 24 hours or so. So both sides are holding fire. But it was reiterated that these U.S. forces are forward postured. At any time, they are ready to relaunch a fight. As a matter of fact, we have been reporting or trying to get some reports that the United States is preparing for another full-scale combat operation that we saw, back in March and February. Not to that level. That's certainly, I'm not suggesting that's what happened in the past 72 hours or so, but 170 targets were struck over the course of maybe 48 hours, and that is nothing like we've seen since this MOU went into effect, this Memorandum of Understanding went into effect, and Iran retaliated. So it's on a knife edge now, and President Trump has said repeatedly that the ceasefire is over. So these are the threats and the rhetoric that's going on. At the same time, CENTCOM released this statement saying, and it's a war of words as well, Iranian state media claims that transit through the Strait of Hormuz is only permitted through routes designated by Iran. The truth, according to the statement, Iran does not control the Strait of Hormuz. That is arguable because whether it's Iran that's stopping those ships from going because of the threat of being attacked, as 3 commercial vessels were, which triggered all of this attacks and retaliation, or whether it's the U.S. military presence in the region, any of that traffic has essentially ground to a halt, and that's what they're trying to break through. And by the way, the attacks on those 170 targets largely aimed at targets along the Strait of Hormuz and at the mouth of the Strait of Hormuz. So these are targeted, specific attacks. Yes, they would have been punitive, but there is a strategy behind it as well.
And as we cover the hope for negotiations being successful, I think you put it perfectly, on a knife edge. Charlie D'Agata, thank you so much.